Thank you. Your Excellency, Dr. Ali Abdusalam Treki, President of the General Assembly. Your Excellency, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, Secretary General of the United Nations. Mr. Ivo de Boer, Executive Director of UNFCCC. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, and thank you, Dr. Treki, for inviting me to address the General Assembly. It's a great honor for me to be here, and I bring apologies from my husband Sting, who's on his way to Brazil today. It's been 20 years since Sting and I first visited Brazil and met some of the people for whom the Amazon rainforest is home. On that trip, we saw for ourselves the sickening destruction that was taking place, one of the world's most precious resources simply being cleared out of the way, used up, and wasted. We met people who lived in the forest who'd lost their land, their way of life, their families. We met a Kayapo tribesman called Rauni, who asked us to help him deliver a message to the world. Rauni's message was this, as he spoke of the burning rainforest: "There is a lot of smoke, and my people are very sick, but whatever happens in my forest today will affect all of you in your lands tomorrow." Well, as we all know, tomorrow is already here. Over 20 years, the work of the Rainforest Foundation has spread out from Brazil to 18 countries on 3 continents. The foundations based in the UK, the US, and Norway work in partnership with more than 100 local organizations in all major rainforest areas. We've protected over 115,000 square kilometers of forest, as well as an area bigger than Switzerland for the Kayapo Nation. Projects now underway aim to save nearly 1 million square kilometers of rainforest. That's the size of the United Kingdom, Ireland, and France. And alongside our remit to conserve the environment, we support hundreds of thousands of forest peoples in their mission to protect their own rights to their land, livelihoods, and culture. But against the relentless tide of land grabbing, logging, and forest clearing by multinational corporations, none of this is enough. One of the great tragedies of the ancient world was the burning of the great library of Alexandria. Countless volumes of accumulated knowledge were destroyed, and the wisdom of centuries was turned into smoke that cast a cloud, it is said, over the whole planet. Today we face a tragedy even greater. The people of the Amazon have no writing. Their library is the forest. Their university is the forest. Their church is the forest. Every day we're burning down the library that has taken thousands of years to grow. Every day we burn down the natural laboratory that could hold a cure for AIDS, a cure for cancer. We're burning down the kitchen that could tomorrow feed the world. There is an area of the Ecuadorian rainforest I've been visiting for the last few years, which was once a paradise on Earth. In the 1960s, however, Texaco, later bought by Chevron, started prospecting for oil there. The drilling practices used by Texaco and inherited by Chevron had been outlawed in the US since the 1930s, but it was cheaper to take shortcuts. That region is now described by independent assessors as one of the most contaminated industrial sites in the world. Chevron have admitted to dumping 18.5 billion gallons of toxic waste directly into the rivers and onto the ground. That's 30 times more than the pure crude spilled in the Exxon Valdez disaster. 1,000 unfenced and untreated dump sites still leak toxic and carcinogenic chemicals into the rivers and streams 16 years after the company pulled out of the region in 1992. And as a result, the water contains 280 times more hydrocarbons than is permitted here in the US. On my visits to the region, I've spoken to mothers who know that the water that they give their children to drink is poisoned, but they simply have no choice. I met Maria Garofalo, a 38-year-old mother who has cancer of the uterus. Her 18-year-old daughter, Sylvia, has cancer of the liver. They showed me the stream where they collect their water. It stinks of petroleum. Nothing is growing there. The animals that they rear to sell at market die in the toxic environment. So it's no surprise to me that Maria and Sylvia are also extremely ill. A spokesperson for Chevron counters that these diseases are due to poor personal hygiene and sanitation. That's as cruelly cynical as it is preposterous. And so, in 2007, the Rainforest Foundation joined hands with UNICEF Ecuador and the local Amazon Defense Fund to provide rainwater collection and filtration tanks for the families affected by the oil production damage. So now, for the first time in 35 years, mothers can be sure that the water their children drink is free from toxic chemicals. This Band-Aid solution will have to do until Chevron accepts its responsibility to the people whose lands and lives they have devastated. Well, what has happened in Ecuador is not an isolated incident. On the contrary, it is a microcosm of how this world works. For whichever area of the Amazon I visited since the late 80s, it's always the same tragic tale. Sometimes it's about oil, sometimes it's gold or cattle ranching, but whatever it's always about corporate profit. And nobody is holding these big businesses accountable. In the 20 years that Sting and I have been involved in rainforest issues, not once has there been meaningful government consultation with indigenous forest people about the development of their ancestral lands. The UN's Declaration of their Rights has not been bound by governments. In fact, this week, Sting will be adding his voice to the chorus of indigenous Amazon people in protest against the lack of information shared about the Belo Monte Dam in the Xingu River in Brazil. It is time for all governments and industry leaders to work together with indigenous rainforest people to preserve this vital natural resource. Rainforests, as you know, once covered 14% of the Earth's land surface. Now they only cover 6%. When they've been decimated to the tipping point, there will be no way back. We will face such extreme weather conditions that our planet will no longer support human life. In March 2009, a group of climate scientists met in Copenhagen and agreed that the climate situation was actually much worse than we'd thought. It's now believed that there needs to be a 40% reduction in carbon emissions by 2020, rising to over 90% by 2030. We're also now hearing that global temperatures could rise by 6 degrees by the end of this century. Do we want to be the generation that destroyed ourselves? What will it take for us to stop hiding from these terrible